They toasted with champagne the night I saved their legacy, but 3 weeks earlier, the building had felt like it was on fire. I stepped into the Glass Ridge lobby at 7:15 a.m., heels still damp from the storm outside. The usual hum of corporate bustle was gone. Desks stood empty. Conversations were whispers. A kind of nervous silence wrapped around the office like smoke. "Olivia!" someone called from behind. I turned to see a young intern, clipboard in hand, eyes wide behind her glasses. "I'm Ellie. I've been shadowing operations since last month. Everyone says you're the one who can fix this." Fix what? That's what I kept asking myself as I walked past the finance wing, where a whiteboard still read, "Survival Plan Draft." The CFO briefed me in a closed-door meeting just after 8 o'clock a.m. Glass Ridge was bleeding. Investor confidence had dropped. Salaries were frozen. The board had burned through every backup plan. And all that stood between survival and collapse was one thing: a potential deal with Eurotech Global. They needed an infusion of $850 million, and Eurotech was interested, but wary. "I'm assigning you to lead the negotiation," the CEO said, barely looking up from his phone. "You speak their language. You've done cross-border deals before. Legal and strategy will follow your lead." I looked around the table. Legal looked pale. Strategy looked lost. "Understood," I said. I knew what this meant. The company's fate, hundreds of jobs, pensions, reputations, now hung on a single, airtight agreement. I also knew what wouldn't be said out loud if I failed. It would be my name on the chopping block. Later that afternoon, I reviewed the Eurotech briefing packet in the war room. I was halfway through highlighting risk clauses when Ellie knocked on the glass door. "Sorry," she said softly, "but Eurotech just replied to our email. They've rejected a call with the CEO. They only want to meet with you." I paused. Of course they did. Because in crises, people don't want titles. They want competence. The request came in at 9:15 a.m. Eurotech's legal team would arrive in 48 hours. 2 days to lock down the most critical deal in the company's history. I didn't go home. I didn't sleep. Instead, I moved into the 5th floor war room, trading my coat for a gray blazer I kept behind my door. I asked for silence. I closed the blinds. I turned off every non-essential notification, and then I began to read, to redline, to rebuild, page by page. I tore through the master agreement. Eurotech was cautious, intelligent, and ruthless. Every clause was a test. Every term, a landmine. By 11:40 a.m., I was cross-referencing cross-border tax codes. By 4:15 p.m., I'd rewritten 3 key sections involving equity options and severance clauses. Legal offered to help. Strategy offered to review. I waved them off. "I've got it," I said. Not looking up, the CEO didn't check in once. The only person who did was Ellie. At 12:28 a.m., she appeared at the glass wall, holding a paper cup in both hands. I waved her in. "You look like a general in a war film," she said gently, placing the coffee on the table. I didn't smile. I was too deep inside the structure, too focused, too aware that this deal had to work, but also had to protect me. Just in case the board forgot what I had done once the crisis passed. At 1:09 a.m., I created Clause 7.4, tucked into the miscellaneous section, written in neutral legalese. It stated, should Olivia Tan be removed or reassigned from any executive oversight role within 18 months of contract activation, this agreement shall be nullified at the discretion of Eurotech Global. It wasn't sabotage. It was insurance. I wrote it quietly. I didn't announce it. No one knew. But I knew how these people worked, how they praised you in the storm and erased you in the calm. This time, I wouldn't leave the back door open. By 6:20 a.m., my hand was cramping from signature blocks. The sun was creeping in through the blinds when I finally leaned back in my chair. Ellie stood silently in the doorway. She must have been waiting. "Is that it?" she asked. I nodded. "It's done." At 7:15 a.m., the email came from Eurotech. "We're impressed. If Olivia remains point of contact, we're ready to sign. If not, we walk." So I signed it, alone, with aching fingers and hollow eyes. One signature, 36 hours, and a clause that no one saw coming. The lobby was decked with silver balloons and a giant blue banner that read, "Welcome, Eurotech. A new era begins." Someone had even brought in a violinist. Not for the clients. Eurotech had already left the building, but for the cameras. By 9:20 a.m., the entire executive floor was packed. Employees from every department filled the main conference hall. A projection screen showed graphs labeled "Stability Restored," "Growth Recovered," and the boldest of all, $850 million secured. And on stage, beneath bright white spotlights, stood the man who hadn't opened a single clause of the deal. Our CEO. He smiled, lifted his glass, and said, "This partnership marks a historic moment, one that would not have been possible without exceptional leadership, strategic vision, and above all, teamwork at the highest level." Applause exploded. People clapped like their jobs depended on it, which, in truth, they did. I was seated in the back, second row from the door, no name tag, no assigned seat, no one looked my way. Ellie slipped into the seat beside me, typing quickly on her phone. A moment later, mine buzzed. "You're not getting called up? Not even mentioned?" I kept my face still. I wanted to believe it was an oversight, a slip, but in my gut, I knew better. This was intentional, polished, deliberate. The CEO went on to thank the legal team, then the VP of Finance, then Strategy, and then he wrapped up with a slow, dramatic pause. "To everyone who stood tall in a time of crisis, thank you. You made this possible." More applause, the kind that buries the truth, as people began lining up for catered lunch trays. I rose from my chair and headed for the side exit. That's when I overheard two senior directors talking behind the curtain. One of them said, "That Olivia woman worked like a machine." The other chuckled. "Exactly. Machines don't need praise. They just do the job." I didn't stop walking. Later, Ellie found me near the elevator. Her voice was quiet. "I'm sorry, that was wrong." I shrugged, but not because I didn't care. I shrugged because I knew what came next had to be silent. What they didn't understand was this. When you build the house, you don't need to live in the lobby. You just need to own the keys. By 10:03 a.m., I was seated in the corner office I had stepped into 100 times before, but never like this. The blinds were drawn halfway. A small pitcher of lemon water sat untouched on the meeting table. Across from me, the head of HR, Marla, was already typing something into her laptop. To her left sat Greg Fulton, the director of strategic growth, who barely acknowledged me beyond a nod. And then, of course, the CEO, looking like he'd just walked off stage at a TED Talk, relaxed, triumphant, untouchable. I'd requested this meeting 2 days ago. After the deal closed, a raise, not out of entitlement, but out of recognition. I had studied the numbers, benchmarked the market, and presented a calm, factual request, one that reflected the scale and stakes of what I had delivered. "Olivia," Marla began, "we appreciate everything you've done this quarter. Truly, you've been instrumental." The CEO interjected with a smirk. "But let's be honest, heroics are commendable, sure, but at the end of the day, you were doing your job." I didn't flinch, but something shifted in my chest. "Just to clarify," I said, voice even, "are we calling a solo cross-border negotiation resulting in an $850 million deal?" Routine? Greg chuckled under his breath. You're good. Olivia, one of the best. But salary structures have to stay within executive alignment. I looked down at the printed offer I had brought with me, outlining new responsibilities, expanded influence, and the undeniable financial impact of my work. It felt heavy now, irrelevant. I see, I said, folding the paper slowly. So that's a no. The CEO leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head. We'll reassess next fiscal year. I stood, quietly. My heels didn't even make a sound on the carpet. Outside the glass wall, I noticed Ellie down the hall, delivering documents. Our eyes met for just a second. She gave me a small, hesitant wave. I nodded back, but I couldn't manage a smile. As I walked past, I heard voices behind me. She's ambitious, Greg said. She's a liability, the CEO replied. Knows too much, wants too much. Ellie froze in the hallway, half hidden behind a filing cabinet. Later that day, she found me in the parking garage, voice shaking with quiet fury. I overheard them, she said. I'll never forget how they talked about you. Never. I said nothing. I couldn't afford rage, not yet. Instead, I opened my car door, slid into the seat, and drove home. By 11:59 p.m., I was at my kitchen table with the original contract in front of me, Clause 7.4. Still buried on page 19, still legal, still mine. And suddenly, so was the silence. The house was quiet when I returned home. No music, no movement, just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the weight of everything unsaid pressing against my chest. I kicked off my heels at the door, poured a glass of water I didn't drink, and sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. It was 12:06 a.m. I opened the deal folder I hadn't touched since the morning I'd submitted it. The final contract with Eurotech, 83 pages long. Triple reviewed. Finalized by a team that had no idea what I'd embedded in plain sight. I scrolled slowly, past the financials, the conversion clauses, the dispute resolution protocols. Then, near the bottom, buried inside miscellaneous provisions, I found it. Clause 7.4. I read it once, then again, and again. In the event that Olivia Tan is removed, reassigned, or otherwise excluded from executive oversight within 18 months of contract activation, the agreement may be rendered null at the sole discretion of Eurotech Global. No one had questioned it. No one had even seen it. Apparently, because they assumed I wouldn't need protection. Or worse, they thought I wouldn't dare use it. A strange calm settled over me. Not anger, not grief, just clarity. They wanted me quiet, replaceable, grateful, and disposable. Fine, then I'd be precise. I opened a fresh page in my notebook and wrote 2 words at the top. Control map, below it. I listed every access point I still held. Legal documents, client contacts, internal memos. I mapped each node like a systems architect. What I owned, what they didn't know I had, and what I could still influence. Then, with a red pen, I drew a line across the bottom of the page and wrote, Countdown begins, I leave in silence. At 1:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Ellie. Are you okay? I've been thinking about that meeting all night. I didn't reply, but I stared at her words for a long time. Thumb hovering over the keyboard. Ellie didn't know the details, but she understood something most people in power never do. You can't humiliate someone into forgetting who they are. You just remind them why they were dangerous in the first place. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and stood at the window overlooking the street. The world outside was sleeping, but inside my mind, the engine had started. No more bargaining, no more asking. This time, I would not raise my voice. I would raise the ground beneath their feet. By 8:27 a.m., I was at my desk, earlier than usual, but no one noticed. That was the beauty of being invisible, until you weren't. The morning sun poured in across the conference tables and glossy floors. Glassridge was still celebrating. News of the Eurotech deal had made rounds in the industry, and the board was already positioning it as a long-term strategy pivot. No one looked beneath the headlines. No one looked at me. Perfect. I spent the next 2 weeks in calculated withdrawal. I slowly shifted responsibilities to the strategy team, one document at a time, one task at a time. I trained a new hire named Marcus, deliberately over-preparing him so no one would feel the need to ask why. Just streamlining, I'd say with a small smile. Efficiency, you know? I cleaned out my folders, archived emails, pulled personal notes from my work laptop. I didn't rush. Rushing raises eyebrows. I moved like someone preparing for a vacation, casual, forgettable. But every action was part of a silent exit strategy. Ellie picked up on it. One afternoon, she stopped by my desk, holding 2 coffees. "You've been different," she said gently, handing me one. "You okay?" I looked up, smiled. "I'm finishing something important." She tilted her head. "Is it a project?" I just sipped my coffee. "Sort of." 3 days later, I attended a quarterly planning meeting in the small conference room on the 12th floor. There were 5 of us, the CFO, head of ops, the CEO, a junior strategist, and me. I took my usual seat by the window. My phone sat face down beside my notepad, voice recorder running silently in the background. The meeting dragged until Greg, the director of strategic growth, leaned forward. "We need to start succession planning. Olivia's presence has been effective, but long-term. We need someone we can mold into something more aligned." The CEO nodded. "She's not scalable, too independent. Let's phase her out quietly after Q2. I said nothing, just circled a word on my notepad. Aligned. That night, I added the audio file to my secure drive at home. I didn't need it for revenge. I needed it as leverage, one last insurance policy in case Clause 7.4 ever came into question. Ellie messaged again at 9:51 p.m. "Are you sure you're okay?" I responded this time. "I'm better than okay. I'm almost free." Because power isn't always about who speaks the loudest. Sometimes it's about who records the silence, and I had just captured enough silence to bury them whole. By 7:33 a.m., the office was already buzzing with hollow optimism. A new deck from marketing claimed Glassridge was poised for global resurgence. Greg was walking around like a man rehearsing for press interviews. The CEO had a breakfast scheduled with a potential investor. No one saw the storm hiding in my inbox. I wore navy that day, plain, unassuming, sharp. I skipped the second-floor cafe, avoided chatter, and walked straight into my glass-walled office like it was just another Tuesday. Inside, I shut the door, sat, opened my laptop, and pulled up the file I had reviewed 100 times. Eurotech Global Final Execution .pdf, page 19, clause 7.4. Still there, still untouched, still my checkmate. I copied the clause into a new email draft addressed solely to legal at eurotech.global. No CC, no BCC, no Glassridge. Subject line, request for clause 7.4. Review and activation, body text. Dear Eurotech Legal, per the terms of the executed contract, I'm no longer serving in an active executive oversight role as originally defined. Please review clause 7.4 and advise on next steps as agreed. Regards, Olivia Tan. My fingers hovered for only a moment. Then I clicked send. It was 8:08 a.m. I leaned back in my chair. The hum of office conversation outside my glass walls faded. A phrase circled quietly in my mind. Collapse doesn't need noise, just a clause. 2 hours passed. I answered a few emails, smiled at a junior team member who complimented my dress. Ellie peeked in and offered to bring me lunch. I declined. At 12:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. From Eurotech Legal Subject, Clause 7.4, Actioned Ms. Tan. As per Clause 7.4, given your confirmed removal from executive oversight, we are proceeding with contract suspension effective immediately. The transfer of funds has been halted. A formal termination letter will follow within the day. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. I read it 3 times. Then I deleted it from my inbox and cleared my trash folder. No gloating, no adrenaline, just the clean, satisfying snap of a wire being cut, and the knowledge that everything above that wire was now falling. At 2:06 p.m., Greg barged into the CEO's office holding his phone like it was on fire. Marla from HR ran past my office window. I saw panic bloom on faces like ink in water. Ellie rushed in 10 minutes later. "What's happening?" I met her gaze calmly. "Gravity," I said. "It always works eventually." The first tremor hit at 8:42 a.m. the next morning. A single headline appeared on a low-traffic financial news site. Eurotech pauses $850 million deal with Glassridge. Contract dispute suspected. By 9:15 a.m., 2 industry newsletters had picked it up. By 10:41 a.m., it was trending on LinkedIn. By 11 o'clock a.m., the boardroom was locked and the CEO hadn't emerged in over an hour. I sat at my desk, sipping tea as emails began rolling in from every corner of the building. Panicked, confused, half-coated with corporate optimism. "Hey, Olivia, quick question. Do you know anything about this? Or any insight on the Eurotech thing?" I responded to none of them. Let them sweat. Let them remember how easily they dismissed me as just doing her job. Greg stormed down the hallway around 11:30 a.m., phone glued to his ear. "She did something, I don't know what, but she did, clause, hidden clause. Who let her touch the contracts alone?" I didn't flinch. I simply clicked my screen off and watched my reflection in the glass for a moment. This wasn't revenge, it was release. By 1:15 p.m., Glassridge stock had dropped 17%. A prominent investor posted a passive-aggressive status about betting on the wrong culture. The internal messaging system froze from overloaded traffic. At 2:03 p.m., Marla from HR passed my office. Visibly pale, she didn't meet my eyes. A junior assistant followed her, holding printed copies of the contract, my contract. It was too late. They were looking for a fuse after the detonation. At 3:45 p.m., I stepped out for air and ran into Ellie near the loading dock. She was wearing a small backpack and holding her phone like she'd just gotten news that changed her entire week. "I gave my notice," she said before I even asked. I blinked. "Today?" She nodded. "I accepted an offer from Solvia Tech in Berlin. I leave tomorrow." I stared at her, surprised, but not. She'd always been sharper than most people noticed. "Is this about what happened?" I asked, softly. "No," she said, then smiled. "It's about what didn't happen. I watched you save a company, then I watched them erase you. And you," she paused, her voice catching, "you didn't even raise your voice. That did something to me." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Go build something better." As she walked away, she turned once more. "Whatever you did, Olivia, it was art." By 6:10 p.m., the formal termination notice from Eurotech was leaked to the press. By 6:58 p.m., every major client had called. Some quietly pulled their next contracts. One simply said, "We'd like to explore other partnerships." The CEO, once untouchable, left the building at 7:02 p.m. with no security escort. No limo, just a man whose empire had slipped through his fingers before he even realized it was gone. And I just shut down my computer, folded my blazer over one arm, and walked to the elevator. The building was collapsing behind me, not with noise, but with the weight of every silence they forced me to swallow. By 8:20 a.m., the story had broken wide open. A junior reporter from Capital Index Weekly had somehow obtained the full contract between Glassridge and Eurotech. Buried in a paragraph most people would have skipped, she highlighted a clause, barely 3 lines long, written in legal gray ink, that detonated an $850 million deal. Clause 7.4. It didn't take long for the internet to do what it does best. By 9:06 a.m., someone on X posted a screenshot of the clause with the caption, "Who is Olivia Tan, and why do I want to be her when I grow up?" By 10:12 a.m., that post had 78,000 likes. A second-year law student on TikTok broke down the clause line by line, calling it the cleanest act of contract warfare I've ever seen. He ended the video by saying, "She didn't raise her voice. She just raised the stakes." The hashtag Clause 74 began trending globally. Glassridge tried to spin it. Of course, they released a vague statement by 11:30 a.m., calling the event an unfortunate contractual misalignment. But the damage was already irreversible. More importantly, the truth was finally out. And this time, they couldn't erase my name. By 12:20 p.m., my inbox was flooded. Recruiters, journalists, ex-colleagues, even the head of a global ethics board sent a note. That was the most elegant resignation letter we've ever seen. It just happened to be written in ink and buried on page 19. I didn't reply to any of them, but I did read one post. From Ellie, she wrote, "Her name is Olivia Tan. She doesn't need a microphone. She wrote the system, and then she rewrote the ending." Her words hit harder than all the headlines combined. At 2:02 p.m., I walked into a co-working space in the city's arts district. Nothing fancy, just open windows and white walls. I nodded to the receptionist, who waved me through without asking my name, because they already knew. On the second floor, in a small glass office, sat my real legacy, Miran Strategies, the consulting firm I had quietly built over the last 18 months. No press releases, no LinkedIn announcements, just structure, substance, and 3 longtime clients who had recently cut ties with Glassridge. Mirayan now managed their accounts, and I managed Mirayan. The irony? They'd called me not scalable, but I'd built a model that scaled without ego, without spotlight, just results. By 3:07 p.m., we secured a 4th client. The onboarding email was simple, titled, "New Beginnings." Later that evening, I walked past a magazine stand on my way home. The cover of Executive Voice read, "The woman who ended the deal and started something bigger." Beneath it, my photo, taken from a press conference I never attended. They had to crop it from a group shot. Fitting. I didn't buy the magazine. I didn't need to. I had something better. My name was back, not on a door or a plaque, but on something no one could steal this time. Page 19. The hall in Berlin smelled of glass, steel, and fresh ink. At 9:03 a.m., I stepped into the conference chamber at the Eurotech headquarters, this time not as a quiet corporate soldier, but as the CEO of Miran Strategies. No more borrowed titles, no more names left off stage backdrops. Today, my name was carved in marble on the itinerary. Key signatory, Olivia Tan. CEO, Miran Strategies. The room was high-ceilinged, humming with hushed German and English conversations. Strategists, legal teams, and board members from 3 continents gathered to finalize Eurotech's largest realignment in history. They'd terminated their deal with Glassridge, and they were starting over with us. I wore a white blazer, no jewelry, no frills. Confidence didn't need decoration. As I took my place at the table, a familiar voice slid into the chair beside me. Ellie. Her hair was tied back now, her suit slightly oversized but sharp. The title on her badge read, Ellie Tran, Chief Operating Officer, Miran Strategies. I smiled, You ready? She exhaled, nervous but steady. I've never been more ready. I chose her the day after she left Glassridge, not out of sympathy, but because she understood something that most people never learn: how to move with both fire and grace. She saw the quiet violence of dismissal and chose to fight it, not with outrage, but with excellence. At 10:15 a.m., the contract was placed in front of me. The same name at the top, Eurotech Global. But the name on the second line had changed forever. I picked up the pen. Signed. Across from me. The Eurotech CEO leaned forward. We've followed your journey, he said. You're not just smart, Olivia. You're surgical. A reporter from a German business outlet raised his hand. One question, he said in English. What would you say to your old company now? To Glassridge? I looked straight at him. Calm, centered. Erase my name, I said softly, and I'll erase your future. No bravado, no gloating, just fact. By 11:50 a.m., the deal was complete. Marianne was now officially advising 3 of Eurotech's European divisions, an opportunity once meant for Glassridge. And as the applause filled the room, I thought about every silent meeting I had endured, every time I'd been praised in private and erased in public. This was not a comeback. This was the rightful continuation of a legacy they tried to steal. That night, I walked along the Spree River, the Berlin skyline glittering in the water. I didn't post about the deal. I didn't call anyone back home. I just let the moment breathe. Some victories don't need headlines. They just need your name, finally written in full. What about you? Have you ever been silenced, underestimated, or pushed aside, only to rise higher than they imagined? Share your story in the comments. And if Olivia's journey resonated with you, even just a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more stories of quiet power, graceful revenge, and women who rewrite the rules in their own voice. Because sometimes, the strongest voice in the room is the one that waited until the end to speak.